Live. Thank you all for tuning in to another Water Cooler Wednesday. We normally have like a week in between, so it's bi-weekly. But right now, this is our second of 3 weeks in a row that we're doing the water cooler for two reasons. One, I had to take off for a while and I was itching to get back. Two, because I was not going to, we pushed this off once. I was not going to push off this interview again with Luke Wright because, well, you'll see why. This man is absolutely incredible. So I'm so excited to have Luke Wright with us today, and I'm excited to have you. Whether you're tuning in from LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, wherever else you might, YouTube, wherever else you might be tuning in live. And if you're watching the replay, that's great too. But if you are live, we encourage you to post your questions, your comments for Luke or I throughout the broadcast. That's why we do these live. So we will be able to see those and bring them up on the screen and interact with you live if you have questions or comments for us. So Luke Wright, Baltimore born and raised. That's where we met, right? This is, yeah, one of the few times in my life that it makes sense to be bragging you're an Orioles fan. Luke and I met. Do you remember where we met originally, Luke?
Yeah, I want to say so. I was teaching at Milford Mill Academy in Baltimore County, and remember, as Dave said, born and raised in Baltimore, and growing up in Baltimore, there are large Jewish communities, especially in the Northern Parkway, Ricestown Road, Pikesville area. And I went to school at Cross Country Elementary, which I think has just been refurbished a couple of years ago. And I wanted to ensure that my African American students had a relationship with the Jewish community and understood why they did the things they did and where there was some overlap and connections between the Jewish community and the African American community. So I reached out to someone that could come and speak to my class. And I spoke to somebody that spoke to someone that put me in touch with you, David. And you came and spoke to my class and enlightened them a bit about the Jewish community, Jewish culture, and Jewish history.
Yeah, that was cool. The very first time was that we met was when I visited your Toastmasters group way back when, and I was
Yeah.
wowed by you. I was like, "This guy is a speaker," and ever since then, I was a huge fan. So since then, you brought me into public school, and I brought you into the women's prison, right? So I hooked you up with that. So it's kind of weird where we take each other. But it's been a cool relationship ever since. But Luke is Baltimore born and raised, retired Marine after 22 years, public school teacher. He's our second water cooler guest ever to be coming to us straight from a public school, which is
Yes.
which is a pretty cool distinction for the 42nd episode I think we're on. He runs the JROTC there. He's the author of The Right Thought, which I highly recommend you check out that book. It's a truly motivational book. He's a motivational speaker. And up until a couple weeks ago, he was candidate for the Virginia State Senate. So I
Yes.
really want to get into it with Luke today because we have a lot of catching up to do. We were talking a lot more before 2020, and then we
Mm-hmm.
sort of lost track of each other. And as you can tell, this individual is extremely motivated, extremely busy. I didn't know if he was actually going to log on today until like 2 minutes beforehand. The guy's got a lot going on. So this seemed like the perfect excuse to catch up with an old friend. But I warned you, Luke. We're
Yes,
going
you
to do
did.
the 6 and 60. This is how we're going to open it up, all right? So you get
Right.
60 seconds total to answer 6 rapid fire questions. Are you
Okay.
ready for that?
Yes, sir. Let's
All
go.
right. To be nice, I'll start by asking you the first question. I won't start the timer till I'm done asking that question because I know I'm long winded. So we're not going
Okay.
to hold that against you.
Okay.
All right. When you are feeling overwhelmed or burned out, what do you do to reset or recharge?
Ooh, go running.
Nice. You describe yourself as an underdog, but you've taken on some impressive challenges. What has been your single greatest accomplishment?
Passing swim qualification at Marine Corps boot camp.
Huh. If you could have a superpower, what would it be?
Woo! If I could have a superpower, uh, to be invisible.
Best piece of advice or wisdom you've ever received?
Be humble.
What's one thing people would be surprised to know about you?
Uh, ooh. I don't have a great diet.
In 5 words or less, what's the meaning of life?
To learn.
Nice. Love it. You did it, man. That's that.
Oh,
This might now go up there as your single greatest accomplishment. I don't know about how difficult it is to become a Marine, but 6 and 60, that's pretty darn difficult.
6 and
So
60. There we go. 6 and 60.
nice.
All right.
So so Luke, can you is it okay that I'm calling you Luke instead of
Yes,
your
of
official
course.
title is Major, right? Am I making that up?
Right. I'm retired from the Marine Corps, but since I holding the position as a Navy JROTC instructor, I still carry that title, and any instructor that is teaching in that position still holds their title while they're teaching.
Nice. Okay.
Yes,
So
Luke is
Major
fine.
Wright.
Luke is fine.
Um tell us your origin story. What is your story? How did you become, Major Luke Wright? Where did all this begin? And especially, we're going to be talking today about this idea of it goes beyond just talent. And I know
Oh
you to
yeah.
be a pretty talented guy, but where did you get? How did you get here today to
Oh,
where you're speaking to people and helping them overcome their challenges like you are?
so I would say first of all, helping came from my mother. My mom still lives in Baltimore, still lives in the same house that I grew up in, and that she bought, I think, in like 71 in Northwest Baltimore. And she would always go out of her way to help people, right? Whether it was an old person, a stranger. And I think she got that from my grandmother, who in Jamaica would often take in strangers that were traveling and give them a place to stay overnight during their travels. But the voyage from being a kid from Baltimore and going to the Marine Corps and starting off enlisted as a private and retiring as a major uh, was a very challenging road, David.
Mm,
Um, Growing up in Baltimore, going to school, I had no idea what the Marine Corps was, right? No idea. My older brother was in the Air Force for a short amount of time. He didn't really enjoy it. And my neighbor, Mark Bennett, was a Marine. And he came home from the Marine Corps and he told me about it. And he was very surprised when I decided to enlist. I graduated from Poly, the greatest high school in Baltimore. And when I graduated, David, I was burnt out. Um, Poly was very academically aggressive, challenging. They had an A course and a B course. I got into the one college that I applied to, which was Towson State University, which is
nice.
still in the same place. So I went to Towson. I think I got there in August and I lasted a whole semester. So I was home by December.
Wow.
Um, I didn't go back because I couldn't afford to stay. I left there with a bill of about $2,500. And from there, my dad put me into CCB, Baltimore Community College. And I was going there, and I think it was on Liberty Heights or Liberty Road. And I was there for a year, David. and I was paying for my tuition by working at a dry cleaners at the corner of Greenmount and 33rd, which was right down the street from Memorial Stadium at the time.
Right.
And so I would use my minimum wage job at the time to pay my tuition, and I would put the rest on a credit card. And I got real tired of that. Ran into the Marine recruiter in Mondawmin Mall,
Hmm.
and I tried my best to give him the Heisman, a couple times, but he was very persistent, and I decided to enlist in the Marine Corps for 6 years, and that's how it all started.
Wow. So your time in the Marine Corps, what, like using that as sort of the lens, what do you learn about hard work versus core talent there? Because I could imagine you're not walking into the Marine Corps looking like me and doing well. So there's got to be some like core talent, some sort of core like skill level that's required. But what did the Marines teach you about hard work versus talent?
Okay, so I'm currently reading this book right now, right? How to Own Your Own Mind by Napoleon Hill. Great book. This goes great with Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. And one of the things they talk about in those two books is controlling your mind and persistence. So picture a kid going to boot camp in South Carolina. I'd never been to South Carolina before, and I wasn't afraid of the water, David, but I had no idea what to do once I got in the water. So you go to boot camp and they take everybody and they put you in the shallow end of the pool, and they ask you to swim across the width of the pool. And I couldn't swim. So what I did, I mimic hand motions like this, and I kept one foot on the bottom and kind of did this
Yeah.
thing across the pool. Of course, standing, on the pool edge are drill instructors, and they can see everything. It was like, okay, this kid is not fooling us. So I ended up with the kids that couldn't swim, and you would go through these sessions in the pool where they would run you through different tests to see what you could do, and if you didn't pass, you would go back to regular training, and then all of a sudden someone would tell you on a particular day, hey, you're going back to the pool. And you're like, oh man, I'm going back to the pool. But you hadn't really learned any skills from the last time. You just drank a lot of water.
Huh.
So persistence was key. Knowing that for me, it wasn't an option of going back to Baltimore, right? I was not going to go back to Baltimore without the Eagle, Globe, and Anchor and saying that I was now a United States Marine. For me, that was not an option. So whatever I had to do to make sure I passed, I was willing to do. And David, I think I went back, it was about 5 times. The final time that I went to swim qualifications, I was on a bus. It was a white bus that would transport us from whatever training evolution we were at to the pool. And I remember the time that I went, there's probably 3 recruits on the bus with me from my company. And after I passed, I was completely drained, from top to bottom. I just had no energy left.
Mhm.
But it was my persistent, not talent, right, that allowed me to keep going. You can be a very talented individual. We have the NBA, we have the NFL, you have college, you have professional sports. And I ask students many times, I say, if you have one player who is extremely talented and you have another player that consistently shows up and is a hard worker, which one would you rather have? And every time students tell me they would rather have the person that consistently works and shows up rather than the person that has talent. And I say, why? And they say, well, the person that has talent may be able to do some awesome things, but I can't count on him and her being there every day for practice in order to prepare us for the game. So when it comes to success, talent has a part, right? But it's not the main ingredient.
Yeah, that's great. So first of all, you said that you were not going back to Baltimore without being a Marine. Was that pride? Was that the alternative of going back to Baltimore? That alternative door that you would open to the to your future? What was it that made you say that I'm not going back without this?
My mom was tough, right? I mean, tough on me. Um, I left home, and I was just me and my mom, and my dad was always in my life, but he lived across town, and I had brothers and sisters that lived with him from his other marriage, and I left my mom's house and went to live with my dad, um, and some interesting things happened, and I was put out from my dad's house, and I had to go back to my mom's, uh, kind of with my tail, between my butt.
Hmm.
And due to that situation, I was not willing to go back. I wanted to be able to say I can make it on my own.
Yeah.
So that was one of the biggest reasons for me. I wasn't willing to going back to Baltimore was not an option for me.
So, I work a lot around passion and
Uh-huh.
the dualistic model of passion where there's a healthy passion and there's an unhealthy passion. And one of the things on that thin line between the two is knowing when to stop. We talk so much
Ooh,
about the importance of grit,
right.
but we rarely talk about where it's appropriate to put on the brakes, where it's appropriate to quote unquote quit or bow out. What
Mhm.
have you? Where is that line for you? How would one determine when it's okay to stop in order to avoid the burnout, in order to cut your losses, in order not to get hooked into that sunk cost fallacy where we've invested so much so we don't think we can turn around.
Oh man.
When is it appropriate to quit?
So I I don't think I ever found myself in that position in the Marine Corps. And I'm not saying that people don't, because there is a time when you should walk away. But recently, I found myself in that position as a candidate for Virginia State Senate, District 27. So I was running for Virginia State Senate in my hometown, not my hometown, but the town where I currently live, which includes Fredericksburg, Stafford, and Spotsylvania, Virginia. And running your campaign, you need a team, you need a campaign manager, you need a finance manager, a field manager, volunteers, and you need a support, right? Um, Tiger Woods had a coach. Michael Jordan had a coach. You know, your pitchers have coaches. Your quarterbacks, even your coaches have coaches and mentors. And I found myself, David, in a position for 2 months where I was all by myself. My field manager, who was awesome, had taken a job with the federal government that he applied to before um, he came onto the campaign. And I was doing things all by myself for 2 solid months. And it began to put a strain on my family, my relationship between my wife and my kids, and my mental health. And I'm a big community guy. I do a lot of things involving the community, getting kids involved in summer STEM camps and volunteering. And at a point, I said to myself, I can still do what's important to me without being a senator.
Hmm.
And I made a decision to walk away from running as a candidate to become a Virginia state senator, because it was sacrificing. the relationship that I had with the people that I valued the most. And I wasn't willing to sacrifice that. So whenever you find yourself in a position where you're sacrificing things that matter most for things that matter least, then that is the time to walk away. In the Marine Corps, I often tell enlisted and officers that the Marine Corps will be there when you're 20, when you're 8 years, you're 12 years, you're 15, your 20 years are up. But is your wife and kids and your friends, will they still be there? So if you ever find yourself in a position where you're missing anniversaries, holidays, birthdays, dates consistently, where you're getting close to that promotion, right? But you're getting farther away from your kids and your wife, those are the times when you need to have a, as they would say, a coming to Jesus moment and say, am I doing the right thing?
Yeah, that's beautifully said. A couple different points. First, the importance of community, which I want to get back to. That support, that you need that support around you. And as it was suddenly just you, that's when there was a clear sign that this was going to be too much.
Yeah.
But also not identifying completely with the job title, you know,
Mm,
with the Senate candidate or the senator. You were identifying with the deeper thing, like what am I doing this for? And it's very much the difference between being obsessively passionate, which is this tunnel vision, versus
mm-hmm,
harmoniously passionate, where you see how it all connects with your life. So when you were talking about that, I was thinking about something that I often say, that with obsessive passion, you will work until one of two things happens. Either you burn out or the world around you burns down. Just like you were
mm,
saying about in the Marines, where the Marines are there, you'll be a Marine, but everything around you might burn down if you're not careful with it. But we have a question or a comment here. That's a great point you bring up, David. It can be difficult because, of course, I want to do and be my best, but learning when to stop to prevent burnout can be hard. I especially think about this as being a Black queer woman in the workplace. I appreciate you, Luke, mentioning work life balance as well, because that's a huge factor in making decisions around career development, too. So, yeah, I want to hear your thoughts on that.
oh, wow. So two things, and I'm going to be very transparent um, on the comment the person made. So about a week ago, I ran into a neighbor that I haven't seen in about 3 years, David, right? Because he'd been going fighting some health issues, and he's also a retired Marine and an officer, retired Marine Corps officer, and his health got so bad that he had to make the decision to walk away from his job, where it was a very lucrative job, getting paid very well. And when I was speaking to him, this gentleman is probably a good 15, 20 years older than me. He began to tear up, right? And when you see another man cry, it does something to you, right? I'm not saying men shouldn't cry, but it really does something when you see another man cry. And he said to me he wished he had done things different. And what he was trying to tell me, that he had valued his job so much that he forgot to invest in the small things, right? Maybe it might have been that relationship with his son or relationship with his wife. And at that point, it took his health being in jeopardy for him to realize that the people that he saw every day at home was more valuable than that paycheck that he was getting every 2 weeks. Now, the person that asked the question mentioned that they were African American and queer, and I'm sure there are a lot of challenges that come with that. And sometimes the world is not ready for our dreams or individuality or differences. And I'm going to be very transparent with what I'm about to say. here, David, because a lot of people aren't willing to be as transparent as I'm about to be. Um, are you familiar with the show All in the Family, David?
Yeah, of course.
Right. So All in the Family, you got Archie, the Jeffersons, you got George Jefferson, two polarizing individuals that you know you probably wouldn't want to meet today, right? They were funny for their era. About 12 years ago, I remember being um, going to a grocery store in Virginia, and me and my girls were in my vehicle, and I pulled up behind another vehicle, and the other vehicle in front of me had two individuals in it. Right, I could see they were in the front seat. The person in the driver's seat was a male, and the person in the passenger seat was a female. And the driver was dropping off the passenger. And when the person got out of the passenger seat, I realized that it was a male dressed as a female. But it appeared that it was his first day, right? Dressing up as a female because he kind of walked awkwardly. He had on, a skirt and I think a blouse and so forth. And I began to laugh, right? I had I think two of my girls in the car, and I began to laugh at how awkward this individual looked to me. And my daughters said to me, Dad, that's not funny, you
Wow.
know, and I had to step back because I was like, man, I got like a 10 and 11-year old correcting me.
Yeah.
And I had to realize, like, wow, I need to look at this situation much differently. As a Marine, there's no other uniform that I would be more prouder to wear, right, than my Marine Corps uniform. Even for one day, I wouldn't wear an Army, Navy, or Coast Guard uniform. I'm not saying those individuals shouldn't be proud of those uniforms, but because I'm so proud of being a Marine, I would never put one of those uniforms on, right? I just wouldn't feel comfortable. And I had to say to myself, David, I've heard people say they feel like a male trapped in a woman's body or a woman trapped in a male's body. And I had to say to myself, if I would feel so uncomfortable in a Navy uniform as a Marine, and I could take that uniform off if I wanted to freely, how does someone feel if they're a male in a female's body and they could never get out of it?
Mm.
And the courage to come out into society dressed as how you truly feel. That takes a lot of courage, right? And being corrected by a 10 and 11-year-old was a very humbling experience. And over the years, I've changed my perspective and have a different understanding. So I welcome that person for sharing their perspective.
Yeah, that's a really strong point about the role that intersectionality plays in our own lives and just the way the world views us as opposed to the way we would like to be viewed and how authentic, how safe we feel being authentically us. Um,
Hmm.
Before I get to that follow up question, John said, I'm pretty sure that knowing when to quit is a pretty prominent point in Angela Duckworth's original Grit book, too. It's important. Um, and I absolutely appreciate your daughters for that and your willingness to understand slash shift perspective. There's a difference between willful ignorance and ignorant but willing to learn. Yeah, absolutely. Love that.
Yes.
So, but that does bring up a point. You describe yourself as a lifelong underdog, right? That you've been successful in so many things and taken on so many challenges very bravely, despite seeing yourself as an underdog. And how difficult, how much more weight do you carry with whatever makes you feel like that underdog, whether it's race, gender,
Hmm.
sexuality, or whether it's um, just not being able to swim, or whatever it is that makes you feel like an underdog. Where do you find the courage and the strength to push forward and to be successful? Because I also assume that when you talk about things like, it's not just about talent. You seem to be speaking to people who might be writing themselves off from the beginning because they're saying, I'm not good enough. And you're
Hmm.
saying you are because of X, Y, and Z. So I wonder, in your experiences, what have been some of those burdens you've carried, and
Hmm.
and what does it do to you? Because it seems, almost because you seem to wear this label of underdog with pride, it seems almost like it drives you, but for many
Hmm.
people it shuts them up and shuts them down and burns them out.
So I would think sometimes it comes from a bit of ignorance of not knowing what I'm gonna face, not realizing what's out there. So I don't focus on it as much. So with the Marine Corps, I didn't know how much of a challenge it was going to be. Um, so I didn't focus on it so much. There was no drill instructor that I ran into at Marine Corps Depot Press Island that was more intimidating than my mom. So I was well prepared. Um, Being the underdog, um, when I watch TV and I watch sports, David, I'm always rooting for the underdog because I think people that are underdogs tend to have an eternal dogfight in them that can overwhelm talent, right? Overwhelm ego. When you realize that you're dealing with a force that will not quit, that does something to somebody, right? Um, when you realize I can't get rid of this person, right? They're not going anywhere. That's very intimidating, right? That means that you have to deal with me, right? I'm not taking no for an answer. What I learned, one of the most valuable lessons I learned, David, is from panhandlers and homeless people, right? I've lived in various places. I've lived in Virginia. I've lived in Baltimore, Rhode Island, California, Japan. Um, and I've seen homeless people at gas stations, on median strips. And what I've realized about homeless people is they aren't focused on the no. They're not focused on the thousands of no's they get every day. They're not focused on you rolling up your window. They're not focused on you turning away from them and putting your hands on the steering wheel and looking clear out of your windshield mirror and ignoring them. They're focusing on the next yes. So, as the underdog, I think the underdog, individuals like me, we're so focused on the yes that the no's and I can't help you and come back tomorrow and this is not a good time kind of roll down our shoulders and down our backs. Not that our feelings don't get hurt, but we're more focused on that yes that we realize that the no is temporary and is less important than the yes that we're looking for.
Yeah, yeah. And then when you get, I feel like as you climb that ladder and there's a further place to fall, and there's this added ego, behind you, the no's become very scary, because
Mm,
it could shatter that ego that you've built. And so I definitely appreciate that. I want to circle back to the way you talk about your mom, because it's, in a lot of ways, and I'll be careful how I say this because she does watch these episodes. But my wife is very scary. No, but I talk about it often. How she is the kindest person I know, and certainly not the nicest person that I know.
Okay.
But absolutely the kindest person I know. In the Jewish tradition, um, uh, there's a reference to a spouse, and specifically a wife, because it's an old tradition, so we have different roles. When we go back that far, but uh, there's this reference to a wife as your Ezer Kenegdo, which is Hebrew for your helper opposite him. And so,
Ooh.
and I think that is exactly the role that my wife plays for me, where she is absolutely supportive of me, and she
Mm-hmm.
proves it by going up against me when I'm going in the wrong direction. When I need that encouragement, she's not going to tell me, "You're doing great, honey," if I'm not. She's going to tell me that I better fix this.
Mm.
And so that type of support, I find, is incredibly helpful. You find oftentimes that I've struggled with this as a nice manager, not wanting to upset anybody and wanting everybody to like me, that I
Right.
drop the ball at giving people the support that they actually need, which is that feedback, that push, right? That your
Mm-hmm.
mom gave you, that my wife gives me. We hear a lot about the Marines as a team, right? You talked a little bit
Mm-hmm.
about your team when you're running for state senate. What kind of support do you find is helpful? Whether it's that nicer, sort of traditional, the way we think about support first, that mom support. What do you
Mm-hmm.
find has helped you the most, or in different ways, as you've accomplished so many amazing things?
I think it has to be an ingredient of people, right? I'll go back to the book Think and Grow Rich that talks about a mastermind, right? And it's so odd that I have this book here, right? So um, I took the liberty a couple of days ago of writing people down that I would want in my mastermind that would help support me. And
Mm-hmm.
these don't have to be people that you've ever met. Some of them can be close to you. Some of them could be historical figures. Some could be sports
Uh,
figures. So I'm going to read off my list of 10 people that I have, okay? And the reason why I have them in my mastermind, okay? So number one, in no particular order, right, is Abraham Lincoln, right? I would have him in my mastermind for his ability to deal with conflict and challenges, right? Being able to pull the country together at its most turbulent time in history is just phenomenal to me. Number two, Nolan Ryan, right? The great uh, professional baseball pitcher. He pitched all the way into his mid 40s. So I value him for his control over his body, mind over matter. Next on the list, number three, no particular order, Kobe Bryant, the late and great Kobe Bryant, for his discipline. So many times, Kobe was willing to practice and work on his craft when his fellow players were out at the club, strip club, dancing, entertaining, you name it. Malcolm X, Malcolm Little, his dedication to education and self improvement. Uh, him taking the time while he was incarcerated to read the dictionary from beginning to end in order to raise his vocabulary and educate himself. Number five, my dad, Robert Wright. The courage he had to come to the United States and start his own business. My dad didn't have a pair of shoes of his own until he was 17. And at one point, he had about 3 or 4 stores, optical stores, in Baltimore and one in Delaware at one point in time. Next, a good friend of mine, Brian Hawkins, who used to teach with me here at Columbia Heights Educational Campus in DC, left his job as a teacher to write, edit, and review books and comic books. Um,
uh,
so Brian is very careful with his time. So that sometimes I may call Brian and he will not answer, not respond. And I had to respect that because he was focused on his time. And the message is here, David, is you never allow people to afford your time if you know they're not going to respect your time.
Mhm.
I may be just calling to jaw jack around, but he was focused on, whatever he was doing. He was like, "Hey, Luke, I can't talk to you right now." Um, Number 7, the author of the 48 Laws of Power, Robert Greene. If you have never read this book, check it out. It's like getting the playbook to a dirty politician. I look at it like chess. You may not use these moves, but you want to know how your opponent is going to play. Um,
Hmm.
Number 8 is my dog Geechee. Okay, he's a red lab, and he is very forgetful. He may do something, and 2 minutes later he doesn't remember it, but he's always friendly, always loving, always wants a hug, always wants to kiss, just friendly. So I appreciate him as being a constant, lovable, happy going person no matter what's going on. 9 is my wife, Melissa Wright. Focus. Whatever she's doing, that's what she's doing. Nothing else. If she's working, she's working. If she's coming home and she's vegging out on TV after a hard day, that's what she's doing. If she's playing spades with her friends, that's what she's doing. Complete and utter focus on the task at hand. And last but not least is my best friend, Nate Proctor. Um, he takes the time to absolutely enjoy his life. He's a postal worker in Houston, Texas, in Katy, but he takes the time off to spend with his significant other, to go on trips, to go on cruises. He loves golfing, so he makes sure that he spends time doing that. But he never allows his job to become more important than his happiness. So those are the 10 people on my mastermind, and I think don't this may sound crazy, having several times out of the week where you sit down and have a discussion with these people,
Huh.
you know, in your head. And, what would Kobe do? What would Malcolm do? What would Melissa do? What would Nate do? What would Geechee do? And getting mental advice from these people who are part of your mastermind.
Wow. All right. So I've been geeking out on Chat GPT a lot, but I'm thinking with that thing, you could literally ask it to be these people from
Oh,
your mastermind
wow.
and then ask it advice and go back and forth. That's crazy.
Woo.
Try it. Try it.
So I'm
Also, I
going to
see
try
your
that.
next book in the 10 people in your mastermind, but you got to keep the dog in there because I love that.
Yes, yes. I got to
Absolutely
keep
love
Geechee
that.
in there.
Cool. I would read that for sure. So, all right. So we've got all these HR professionals and other leaders who tune in to the water cooler. You're a teacher and a leader. When you see somebody who's struggling with grit, like they seem stuck and they're not getting out of their own way. And by the way, I'm taking notes on this too because I've
Uh-oh.
got a 15-year-old son at home, and
Uh-huh.
I'm going to listen very intently to your advice here. But you've got somebody who is struggling with grit. What do you? How do you like? They're just seem stuck. How
Hmm.
do you get them to the next level? How do you motivate them or inspire them or give them the tools to get to the next level to start like making some putting in more of an effort and making some more getting some more traction?
Um, Let me answer that with a story. Um, I have several students who are currently on full ride scholarships at different schools. I have one student at the Naval Academy. I got one at Southern University. I have one at Jacksonville University down in Florida. Um, and I remember assisting several of them with their plane tickets to go to school, right? Because I never wanted a kid to be in a position where he says, "Hey, Major Wright, I got this scholarship, but I don't have the resources to get there." Right? I'm going to make sure that you get there. Um, and several days ago, a student who decided to leave school for various reasons, right? Um, Reached out to me and he says, "Hey." Um, can you help me get back to school to go get my things, right? Because he's kind of starting over, right? He's back home and he wants to go in a different direction. And my response to him was, um, I'm not going to do that at this time, right?
Mm,
Because my help is not always the answer. And I've
mm,
learned that as a parent. I've got 3 daughters, and I realized that sometimes not giving help and allowing the person to experience their own mistakes and their own challenges for themselves works better than my advice. Somehow, some way, they will work through that situation. Whether they back off and quit for the time being and go back in it, whether they keep going and they keep bruising their knees and they get up and brush themselves and try again. But me constantly giving advice or assisting is not the solution.
mm. Wow, some tough love. See, you're being an Azar Conegdo. This is really great stuff. So, Luke, we need twice the amount of time that we have today, but I want people to be able to continue the conversation with you. So if you hover your phone camera over Luke's QR code, it doesn't let me do that. That would be weird if I could enter your side of the screen. But that will take you to Luke's website, lukemotivates.com. Is that what it is?
Yes, 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 yes.
LukeMotivates.com. I think that there's probably a place on there to purchase the book. Yes. If not, there should be.
Yes, you can also find it on Amazon. The Right
Cool.
Thought. That's WRIGHT, a play on my name. The Right Thought by Luke Wright, available on Amazon. Feel free to follow me on Facebook, Luke Wright, um, or on Twitter or Instagram, Luke underscore motivates, or feel free to email me at Luke motivates at gmail.com. Luke motivates at gmail.com. That's LUKE motivates with an S at the end at gmail.com.
Perfect. And if you and I are not connected and you are watching this episode, then that's just silly. So pull out your phone and put it on top of my QR code, and that'll give you my link tree with a million different ways to connect with me and or learn more. But let's continue the conversation. If you are watching the replay, continue the conversation, and Luke and I will jump in on these chats on occasion to make sure that we don't miss anything. But next week, I hope that you will tune in. Let me get that off for 1 second. When we have our second two-time guest in the second in the history of Water Cooler Wednesday, and that's Rita Ernst. Rita talks about happiness and positivity, and we had her on around Thanksgiving last year as an obvious choice to come talk about gratitude, positivity, happiness. But Rita she just came back from the World Happiness Summit, which I believe was in Italy, maybe somewhere in Europe. The World Happiness Summit. And I was seeing some of the things that she was posting about that. And I said, we need to bring you back because you are dropping fire. I don't know if I'm cool enough to say dropping fire, but she's dropping fire. So Rita will be back next week at 12 p.m. Eastern Time, next week, Wednesday. So I hope you'll tune in then. Luke, thank you again so much for joining us. It was incredible to be able to catch up, and I'm so honored that we could do it in a way where all these other people could join the conversation and or just eavesdrop on us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. And thank you, everyone, for sharing your comments and questions. Hey, can't wait to do it again, David.
Absolutely. Thank you all